Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today, Masechtas Bava Metzia Daf Kuf Hey. We are going to begin on the bottom of Kuf Dalad Amid Beis, about 7 lines from the bottom. Amri Nahar Doi. So we're now going to remind ourselves of a little bit of Eze Neshech, talking about some of the dinim that pertain to interest charging ribis. Hi Iska. When it comes to a business transaction between two parties, we say palga milva upalga pikadin. Half of it is considered to be a loan, and half of it is considered to be like a pikadon, that it's being gifted or given over rather to the person as a safekeep. Now, why is it done this way? So the Gemara continues. Then we'll flesh this out a little bit better. There's a lot of Rashi's and explanation for this. So, Avin Rabbanan Milsa, the Rabbanan did something to nichli lelova, to make it good for the borrower. If we're again viewing this business deal, you have the investor and this person who has this money, so he's considered the one who's selling the items as the borrower. V'nichli l'malva, also the owner of the item. So as we're going to see in this Rashi, let's see the Rashi first. First wide line. Hamakabel pragmatia mabahabayas. Let's say a person accepts monies for doing business, or let's call it merchandise. V'shamola kafidameha. We evaluate its worth. Shehi shavakan. V'malichel makom hayoker. So basically, he figures out how much it's worth, and then he goes to another location. He sells it for a higher amount of money. L'machsis schar, and he ends up getting half of the reward. So, for example, you have this owner of an item, and the thing is assessed at $80, and this person can go somewhere else and sell it for $100. So there's a $20 profit, and therefore they would basically split. They would split the profit. That's what it sounds like. We're going to see it's not that simple. Chatzi achrayis. Actually, what happens is chatzi achrayis oinsen olav kil milva. Half of the responsibilities are upon them like a milva if something happens to that. Chatzi achrayusa obam kipikadin, and half of it is considered like a pikadin. So depending on if, let's say, something happens to it on the way, so then it has a different halachic status. So again, one who has merchandise, he gives it to someone else to sell elsewhere for more money, and again they split this profit in some sort. So, as we said, the Rabbanan do this form of a tikkun. They make this takana in order to benefit both parties in this business deal, the one who owned the merchandise and the one who is selling it. Okay, so therefore, again, the one who's now holding this item to some level, it's not like just as a pikadon, but also has somewhat of a status of a loan. Okay, now let's go straight back into the Gemara. So, what exactly is this referring to? So, hashda diamrinan palga milva. Since we're saying that half of this merchandise is actually considered to be like a loan, so boy lemishti be shechor shaperdami. So this person who has this merchandise, the merchant, which is also the lova, the borrower, if he wants, he could drink beer with it, which doesn't mean he has to be drinking beer, but it means shaperdami. It's perfectly fine, because basically we're saying if you get a loan, so you can use that money for whatever purposes, and therefore also that's the whole notion that it's in the benefit of the lova, because he could use it for his own personal use. Rava oimer lahachi karle iska. No, this is called a business deal. The reason why they're engaged in a business deal, why it's specifically a business deal, is the amrli ki avinalach, when I give it to you, luzasuki bay, is the whole purpose is for you to trade. However, lo lemishti bay shechra, not for you to take it and to drink beer with it. So basically, according to this opinion, no. According to this opinion, you don't have the personal use. Okay, fine. Maybe for some other reasons it's called like a loan. However, at the same point, the din is that it's not allowed to be used for personal use because this investor specifically gave it to him as a business deal, again, to sell it somewhere else for a higher profit, not for his own purposes. Okay, Ravidi Baravin. So we continue and we quote the words of Rav Idi Baravin that he says, V'im Mace, if let's say this merchant, this worker, this lova, who again was given this merchandise, died, so Nas Metaltalin Eitzel Bonav. So we say that this the children inherit the loaned portion, because we said half of it is a pikadon, half is like a loan. So therefore we say that the children inherit it, and the investor cannot claim them for their father's debt. Okay, so let's continue. Let's see. Rava disagrees. Rava Amr Hachi Karli Iska. It's actually called business. Why? Because it always must be available for trade. Therefore, then the children do not have rights to this. Okay, now let's go straight into Rashi. The mace halova but iska kayamas, the merchandise is still around. Biad banav, when it's in the hands of the children. Harichetzia shehim milva, the half which is a loan. Nas metaltalin, it's a banav. It's considered like metaltalin. And here's the key line: Ve'enam balim goyvim menu. The balim can't collect from it. This the original owner who gave it to him. The metaltalin the aslun mishabdi l'bal chayiv. So even though there's a loan, if you will, but it's considered to be like halachically metaltalin, and therefore it's not meshubed, and therefore the children don't have to pay that portion back. And Rav says no, it's called a iska, which means it's always considered to be an iska, and therefore the whole notion is, therefore if the lova would die, then the children do not have the rights to this as metaltalin. And again, the notion that it's around, it's considered like karka. Now the truth is, again, that we say, well, it has half of the status is like a loan, but in a normal loan is a hotzanisna. But over here, the merchandise was not supposed to be used, and therefore, according to Rabbi, right, he said, we saw previously, that you can't use it for purposes of drinking beer. It's for business. Therefore, it actually has a status like karka, which is meshubed, and therefore they would have to give that back. Okay, so that's the two opinions where they argue. Now we're going to continue again with another wrinkle about these dinim. And Omer Rava says, Chad isko tre shtari pseida de malva. Okay, so let's just translate this first. That if you have one business deal, however, that one business deal was written on two different shtaros, two different documents, so the fact that they're on two different documents, it has the halachic status like they're two different iskas, like two different business dealings. And therefore, that will end up causing a loss to the malva, to the one who was the investor. Now, the reason for this, we have to understand, is that they do not share equally in the gains and losses. They share equally in the business losses. A business deal where half is a loan and again half is a deposit. So actually a third of the profit goes to the owner, but but the owner can lose up to a half. So since half is a loan, you can't give back the full half of the loan. So if it's split equally, it would seem like interest for the loan. So what exactly is this talking about? So Rashi paints the picture beautifully for us. We'll just see a small piece of this. Say to the Malva, we're going to jump. It's a long Rashi. We'll see some of it. Mishum the stam iska tilta ba'agar l'bal habayis. As we said, the owner of this merchandise would profit a third. Upal behefsid. They lose half. So they share equally in the losses, but the owner only gets a third in the profits. This is brought down in the Ezaneshach. So the ilu mixi karibis, we don't want it to look like ribis. That's the reason why it's got to be a third and not a half. The kivan de palga milva, since half of this business dealing is considered halakha like a loan, ilav de shakel mantab agra de palga pikadain ishtachat to chatarach pipikadan mishum ribis milva. Again, it looks like ribis. Now, Let's continue. Hilkach. Manyav iska trey shnei chavilois begadim bimana. Let's say he has two bundles of garments, and they're equal $100. So, and nichtov star al shalmana, they write a star of 100. So how does it work? And this is one star for one business deal. So imafsid ba'achas midachavilo. So let's say one of those bundles is a loss. Medemei hakaren mechamishim. Since each one is 50, because the total is 100. So since the losses, there's a loss of 50. So therefore, because of that, hey dinarim, medemei hakaren mechamishim hey dinarim. So since it was 50, so now it went to 45. Okay? Umishtaker b'chaverta tesvav dinarim. And let's say, in the event that it would go up from 50 to 65. So let's imagine that there was a loss, could be a loss of 5, or a gain of 15. So ein kan cheshbon hasel levad l'schar levad. We don't look at each one separately. El nishtaker b'pragmatia zu yudinarm. We say that there's a gain of 10. Why? Because if there's two bundles, one of them there was a loss of 5, and then the other one there was a gain of 15. So therefore, we end up saying that it's like one. We add them both together because it's considered like one iska because it was written on one star. And therefore, the total gain was 10. Then again, when it comes to the gains, they would split it up a third to 2/3. Okay, now let's skip down a couple of lines. Shlish shehin dinar shlish dinner makabel yitel shnei shlishim. As we said, the owner would get 1/3, and the worker would get 2/3. So again, out of a profit of 10, so one would get 3 1/3, the other one would get 6 2/3. Okay, that's the idea. Now that's the din. Again, all we have to do is remember losses are split, the gains are 1/3 to 2/3. So that's what the din would be. Again, if it was one star, one iska, so therefore we look, okay, it was a loss of 5 here, gain of 15, so 15 minus 5 is 10, so it's a total gain of 10. So we look at total profits, so one gets 6 2/3, one gets 3 1/3. Now, ikas of alayhu shnei shtaros, which is what we're talking about in our case, that was chad isko trei shtari, kol chavila shtar shel chamishim. So each star mentions 50. One document says 50, one says 50. Nimsa cheshbon shel kol echad levado. Here we look at each one separately. V'kabel of hamalva behefsid hachetzi shehu shnei dinarim v'chatzi. So what ends up happening? There was a loss of 5. So therefore, since they split the losses evenly, so each one will lose 2.5. Half of 5 is 2.5. U'v'schar shel chaverta lo yitel el shlish. However, when it comes to the profits, you only get 1/3. The owner gets 1/3. So therefore, what's 1/3 of 15? 5. So in this case, this person gained 5, but he lost 2.5, which means he will at least have had a total gain of 2.5. Continuing Rashi, the kabel of hamalva behesed hachatzi shu shnei dinar v'chatzi u'eschar shel chaverta u'yitol el shlish. Okay, lo nimsol chelko schar el shloishim mois dahainu chamishu dinarim the dinar vav, etc. So I said the malva. It ends up being a loss to the malva. Why? Again, if it was written as one star, what did we say? One star, so it was a loss of 5. It was a gain of 15. 15 minus 5 is 10. So now the guy gets 3 1/3. The owner gets 1/3, which is 3 1/3. However, if they're two separately, so then we say the loss of 5 is split. So this guy lost 2.5. But there was another one which had a gain of 15. The gain of 15, he only gets 5. And since he only gets 5, so therefore a gain of 5, a loss of 2.5, he ends up only having 2.5 versus 3 1/3. Okay, so that is the idea behind that. 2.5 versus 3 1/3. Therefore, again, the fact that it was written in two different stars is a pseida de malva. It's a loss to the malva, to the one who gave the money. Okay? It was a long explanation, but you can't just breeze over a line like that if it doesn't make sense. So now let's see the other way as we continue Kuf Hamad Alf. Trey iski v'chad star pseida de loiva. Let's say you have two different documents, one document rather, but they're two totally separate investments. So the two separate investments, so the truth is, again, you could say, well, if it's two different investments, so then we should do as we just said, and therefore the owner would only get the 2.5. But since it's written on one star, so the lova would lose out because now the owner is going to get 3 1/3. I'm not going to go through the whole explanations again. That's the idea. Because as it's one star, it's viewed as one iska. So the profits must first, as we said, satisfy the loss of the other before he receives the profit, and he gets, in this case, 3 1/3, which again would be more for the malva and less for the lova. The Amar Rava, Haiman de Kabul Iska min Chavre. Let's say a person is involved in a business dealing with his friend, as we said, ufasid, and there was a loss. Tarach, the worker, made a great amount of effort. Umale v'loy oidi. So in this case, how does this work? Because this guy apparently did everything he needed to do. So lo matzi armule dari mehech pseida bahadoi. You can't say I want to share in the original losses. Mishum di armule lahachi tarachta lamulise. This is the reason why we were matriach in this matter. Kihech de lo likru lach mafsid iske, so that no one would say that we're called mafsid iske, the one who makes bad business deals. No one wants to be called a person who makes bad business deals. So let's look at Rashi. Dari mehech pseida kamod bahadoi. The kabbalah chatzi hefsid. Again, he accepts half of the loss. V'schar, for benefit, tol shlish, you get 1/3. V'nim sisa poiches min a karen. Diarmoli hachi tarachtu mali dibdolo adatin mikara. Says it wasn't known from before. Nichlam hayisa b'davar v'adaita demili karned tarachta. Okay, continuing the Gemara. Yomi Rabbi Hani Beitrei. You have these two, the Abdi Iska Bahadi Hadadi, that did business with each other. Ravach, they made a quick profit. Good times. Yermali Chad L'Chavre. So one said to his friend, before the term agreement between these two parties expired, he said, Tal Lifloig, let's divide it up now. I'm not interested in continuing business. We got lucky, we made some money. Let's just split up our money and let's part ways even before the term expired. So Iyarmele idach narvach tfei dinahu dem akiv. If the guy says basically that I'm not interested in splitting it up because our term hasn't expired yet, so he can actually hold him back. The Iyarmele havli palg the ravcha. If he says, give me half of the profit, Armale Ravcha Lakarna Mishtabid. So then, again, that obviously if this was the agreement, then that would be okay. The Armale Havli Palo Ravko Palgakarna, give me half of the profit and half of the original investment. Armale Iska Lahadadi Mishubid. So again, he could refuse. Armale Niflig Ravcha Valifa Karna. So he said, when it comes to let's divide up everything, the imatilach pseida darina bahadach, and if it turns out a loss, I'll take the loss with you. Or well, we can say no, mazel de betray adif, that we have better mazel with someone else. So therefore, you can't force an end of a partnership in this regard. Now let's see the next mission. Says the Masisa, a person does this form of kablonos, as we said. We'll see it's what the arrangement was of working the field of someone else's field, and that other person gets some type of benefit. Guy's a good worker, but he says, you know what? Weeding is not in my contract. I'm not going to do any weeding. That's out. So the question is, Is that acceptable? You can say, what difference does it make? I'm going to give you the chachirus, which is I'm going to pay you the same rent anyway. So what's the difference? This is not talking about kabbalos. This is talking about charichus, that chachirus, that the din is that you have to pay a set amount. If you have a bumper crop or a horrible crop, you have to pay the same amount. So you say, well, what's the difference if I weed or not? I'm paying you the same amount of money regardless. So ein shem, that's not a claim. It says, yeah, that's great now, but this is not your land. This is my land, and our agreement, our relationship is not going to be forever, and therefore eventually I may end up having this land, and there's going to be all these weeds. Says Rashi, this whole mission is only talking about chachranusa. If we're talking about kablanus, where a person only pays a certain amount, a half or a third or a fourth, whatever the stipulation is of the crop, if it's successful or not, pshita, our mission should be obvious. How could you say, why do you care? You do care, because obviously the way that if you have a successful crop, this person's going to make more money. So if you weed, you're going to end up having a better crop. So this guy can say, listen, I know my weeding the crops, weeding your field will be better for future crops, but you know what? Who cares? I'm paying you a lot anyway. I'll pay you regardless if I get a lot or not. You can't say that, because eventually this guy's going to want his land back. Says the Gemara, if the renter says that Labasar Hachi, after this season, Kariv Noah, I will plow. Not only will I plow, I'll do a second plowing. So Amalei, he can say, Chiti Mal Yasa Be'ina. I want high quality wheat. Now, as the owner can just flat out say no, that even though you're offering to, instead of weeding, plow a second time, you can say, I want you to have a good crop, so the owner will be paid with good quality wheat. So again, even though it's a set amount, but he can say, but if you don't weed, you're going to give me stuff which is not that same quality. So that's the idea. Don't worry, I'm going to sell the wheat, and I'm going to pay you money. I'm not going to give you shavakes, I'm going to get actual money. So now what difference does it make? Or Malay, still the owner can say, Chite da aroi be'ina. I prefer wheat from my field. I don't want money, I want wheat. The Yermalay, if he says, nach cheshnaloch shir minasech. Basically, you could deduct the amount from your part only. So, okay, I won't weed, but what I'll do is you can just deduct how much that would be lost. So on this, Amalei come mansavas shemra la'aroi. Then all of a sudden you're going to create a bad name on my land, says Rashi. Haroim, those who see my property, svurim, shenichashta, they'll think that maybe I did weed the ground. Vafal pikain. And even with weeding, look at all this. And therefore, by you not weeding, it's going to make people speak badly about my property. If let's say I have another person, I want another sharecropper eventually, they're not going to want to work my field, because they're going to be like, I've seen your field, it's filled with weeds, even after you weeded. So therefore, I don't want people to talk bad. But the Mishnah says it's because it's filled with grass and with weeds. That this plowing will not help regarding these seeds. Says Rashi, I'm worried about future problems in the future. And your second plowing will not be beneficial to alleviate this problem. Says the next Mishnah. Says Mastis. Now, Makabel son of Machavero, again, person's involved in working a person's field. It didn't produce much. And the guy basically wants to quit because like this is a waste of my time. So it depends. If at least it's enough to produce enough that it creates like a pile, so then the sharecropper must continue working. He's not allowed to quit at that point. Says Rashi, Bal Karchai, Vaholesa Ela Bekablonusa. This is obviously talking about kablanus, because if we're dealing with chachrunusa, as Rashi says, then what's the difference? The guy's going to pay you the same amount of money regardless, so therefore, this is specifically talking about kablanus. Amr Yehuda, my kitzba bekri, what exactly is this set amount regarding having a pile or not a pile? El im yeshba kedei nefila. If there's enough produce to replant the field with the seeds that grow for next year. So according to this opinion, it varies based actually on the size of the field, that it's able to produce enough to be able to plant the field for next year. It says the Gemara, again, person is working this field, and it's just nothing's happening. So it says, which is our Mishnah. That's all totally on if there's enough to be able to make a pile. Shekach kaisivu, because this is actually what's written. Quote, Anna oikim v'anir, that I'm going to get up and I'm going to plow. Ve'ezra ve'echtsoid ve'hamir, I'm going to ve'odush ve'edri. I'm going to do all these different things. I'm going to be planting and harvesting and gathering, threshing. Ve'oikim karya kadamach, and I will create a pile before you. So obviously the reason why we use that language is because that's what's totally that must be done. And therefore it's totally that the work has to produce a pile. V'tesi ant v'tito palga, you'll give me half. V'anaba moli, and myself for my effort, v'nafkut yadi palga, I'll be able to get half. So you get basically v'tito palga, you will take a half and I'll get a half. So, and this is explained that basically the arrangement by kablanus is that I get half. Now again it says v'oikim kari kadamach, and therefore it's all told in a pile. V'kama kadei l'hamid b'kri hamash Rabbi Yomi Bar Chanina kadei shetamud by barachas. It's enough that a shovel could stand itself on this pile. So if you stick a shovel in there, it's not going to just fall because there's not a lot in it. What if you have a shovel that goes from this side to this side? Says Rashi, if let's say you could see its points on both sides, which basically means it's not much of a pile. Anytime a scoop of a shovel is not able to literally see the sun. What is that? So says Rashi, so stadim also will fall under this category as well. Okay. Idmar Levi Armer Shol Sayin. He actually gives specifications of how much needs to be produced. That once it's that amount, you can no longer quit. You actually have to continue working. About Karchai, 3 saw. Debe Raviani Amri Sosaim, 2 saw. Amri Shlakish Sosaim Sha'amru. That which you said is a certain amount, 2 saw. Chutzmen Hoit saw. This excludes the expenses of the sharecropper. So it's not enough just the 2. Rather, it has to be beyond the expenses of the sharecropper. It's not wholesome. So, we learned in Masechtas Uksin the following: Paritzi Zeisim v'Anavim. When it comes to, as it's explained, Rashi says, Rishe Zeisim v'Anavim Shein L'olam Boitzer. They never mature. They don't actually reach ripeness and maturity. These olives or grapes. So Beishami Matam and Beisil Mataran. So there's this machlokas whether or not they're tuma regarding tumas oichlin, because they're not good to eat. They're not fit to eat, and therefore if they're not chazil achila, so then perhaps they're tahar, which is what Beisil says. They cannot become achieve tumas oichlin. So the Gemara explains what we already said before. My pritzi zaysim. So Rav Huna rishe zaysim, wicked olives. Rav Yosef my kra, that the word pritzi is like risha. Uvnei pritzi amcha, regarding the pritzim among your nation, yinasu lahamid chazain v'nichshalu. So again, this pasuk clearly links the notion of pritzi to those who have stumbled or bad, and therefore that's what these olives represent. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Omer Mahacha, you can learn from a different pasuk in Yechezkel, v'hoylid ben paretz shevech dam. This ben paretz is a murderer, and therefore obviously that's a bad person. The kama pritzi zaysim. So we said that there's this machlokus with regard to these zaysim, whether or not the din is that they are matamatum zoichlin. So on this, Rashi asks, kama hein ha busholin v'dayin pritzin hein. How ripe or not ripe are they that they are on this status? So Belezer Omer arbas kabin l'koira, 4 kav for a beam. Debei Rav Yani Amri sosayim l'koira, 2. Fine. Let's go slow. What does that mean? It says Rashi, shemach nisin bebeis abad. When you go into the vat for the wine or the olives, kedei shir ti'inas ha'koira, this beam which crushes them. Ve'ein moitziin el arba kaben shemen, because it can only produce 4 kav of oil. V'lo pligi haba asra dimi'ali kura ba'ula had ba'atra dimali tlasakurin. It depends on the size of the press in that particular town, and therefore that's going to be totally in this machlokas, whether it's 4 kav for the beam or 2 saw. Okay, Tanu Rabbanu. Okay, so the Gemara continues on to Kuf Hey Amud Beis. Alu be'ilan so it says in Zovin, a zav and a tahar, or by a tree, that literally its strength is weak, or its branches it's weak. So we say tameh, says Rashi, hatahar, the tahar person who is together with a zav can become tameh being in proximity. Why? Since the tree of the branch is koicha ra, it's not strong, says Rashi, nichpefes tachtehem, it bends down underneath them. V'kami the elyon el tachtoin, and therefore because of that, this zav can contract tuma to this person. So hey Chadam, what exactly is talking about? So Amr Rav Yanai kol she'in bi'ikaro l'choik roiva. So as long as like the main part of the tree is not wide a quarter of a kav. Hey Chadam, so hey Chadam yisoicha shekoicha ra, this branch. Amr Shlakish kol shenech beis b'chez yoina. Anything which is hidden can be hidden by the branch. Okay. Tanhosam, a mahalach bebeis a pras, person who goes into a base of pras, and this is mentioned in many places throughout Shas. It's a field that was plowed, and there was a kever somewhere in that field, and now because it's all been plowed up, we're not concerned of tumas oil, because you need robinion, or the shedra, the galgelos, the skull. But here you could be concerned that, as Rashi says, etzim kasaira, there could still be a bone the size of a barley seed, shematam b'mag v'masa, v'enabatam b'oil. So at that point, it could be matama if it's touched, or b'masa if it's lifted up. So if a person has a pants cuff or something like that, as it's explained, and the bone, while they're walking, falls into their pants cuffs on the bottom of their feet, or falls into their shoe, or wherever it may be, and they end up lifting it up by walking, that's mebtaba b'masa. So that's always a concern when it comes to this. So that is a base of pras. So mahalach bebeis a pras, person is going in the base of pras, al gabi avanim, over stones, shiachol haisit, and the rocks could move. Al ha'adam val behema shekaychan ra tame, regarding a person or an animal that it's weak, so it is tame. So let's look at Rashi. Av haroichev tame. Even a person who's riding could become tame. The kivan de kayach hatachton ra machmas masa elyoin nistu. There's a tumas haste that it could move. The notion of movement. Bar ki'ilu masituhu. The kayach hatachton in a moyel hatzil elinkin kayfa yafe. Okay, so Hechidami Adam Shikoichara, Marish Lakish, Kol Shiraichva, one who's riding, Var Kuvoisav Noikshois, and his ankles are banging into each other. Hechidami Behema Shikoichara, Amr Ramyane Kol Shiraichva Matila Galoim, that the animal produces waste. Okay, so let's stop for a second. Let's look at question 3. What difference does it matter? A tree which is weak. What's the difference with a person who is weak? So an ilan shekoichara nafkamina is a zav and a tahar sha'ol that's by this tree. The nitma hatar, that he becomes the tahar person can become tameh. Adam shekoichara, the nafkamin is one who's roichev olav bebeis pras, one who's riding in a beis pras, nitma af haroichev. Also, the rider can become tameh. Okay. Weiter. This next piece is a little bit lighter. When it comes to tefillah and tefillin, the measurement is 4 kav. Regarding the shear of carrying, person has some bundles on his shoulders. It's time to daven. So pachas medalad kabin. If it's less than 4 kav, then mafshila nacharav. He should swing it over, like behind him, like a slingshot, or like people who are carrying something, they throw it over their shoulder. It's not so heavy, so you can keep it on you. Arba kabin, if it's much heavier, baniach al gavi karka mispal. You should actually take it off, put it on the ground, and then only afterwards daven. Tefillin maihi desanya hayanaisi masoyal roishoi. You have a bundle on your head. Utfillin baroish. You're also wearing tefillin at the same time. Im hayat tefillin roitetzois aser. If the tefillin are getting crushed, then it's aser to have this bundle, because it's a designed to your tefillin. The imam mutter, but if it's not crushed, because the item is light by your tefillin, so that your tefillin aren't getting ruined, so you can have this. So be'eza masoi, what is this referring to? Amr b'masoi shel arbas kabin, that of 4 kav. Tani Rabbi Chia, maitzi zevel al roishoi, the person who has zevel, like fertilizer on their head, or tefillin b'roishoi, so harzel li salkeim with studim. You shouldn't move the tefillin to the side. V'lo yiksherim b'masnav. You shouldn't tie it to your thigh. Because it's a bezayin. Aval kaishirim al zaro. You could tie the tefillin shel rosh onto your hand. B'makam tefillin mishum debei shilo yamru afil mitpachas shel hen aser v'hadiach al rosh. Even the sheet that covers the tefillin should not be on your head. Sheish boy tefillin v'kama. So Rabbi feel riva de pumadisa. So even a quarter, Rashi says reviad litra davar muadhu. Even the smallest amount should not be done. Okay, let's look at question 4, which is also TB2. Amr de Rabbi Yanai, tefillin dalad kabin. My hilchos the number dalad kabin tefillin. So when it comes to tefillah, if you have a bundle, so if it's less than 3 kav, you can just swing it over your shoulder. But if it's 4 kav, then you should put it down on the ground. When it comes to the dinim of tefillin, if it's a masa which is on your head and it's crushing the tefillin, which is less than 4 kav, so it's not really crushing it, there's mutter, but if it's 4 kav, that's already crushing it, and therefore that's Aser. TB2, same question. Let's see what I wrote. Let's feel. Imish masoi al ksefo dalad kabin sarchel hasaras masoi koidem hatfila. Of a pachas medalad kabin yochel espal im hamasoi. Let's fill in im dalad kabin oz. I'm not sure what this word is. It's crushing your tefillin shel rosh v'sarchel hasaras of a pachas medalad yochel luvosh tefillin shel rosh. Okay. And then I also have TA1. Let's see what I wrote over here. So that's the same thing, but it's only referring to tefillah. All right. So it was a little lighter for a couple of minutes at least. Amar Yehuda, my kitzma bekri el im yeshbo kedei nefila. So he said, if this field is not producing much, so the sharecropper must continue working if he was able to produce a pile. So Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's all totally on kedei nefila. As we said, you have enough produce to be able to replant the field with seed for next year, and according to this opinion, therefore it varies based on the size of the field. So v'kama kedei nefila. So Rav Ami Omer, Rav Yochanan arba sain l'kor, 4 saw to a core. So again, it's a proportional measurement. Fine. Rabbi Ami delay Omer shmoina sain l'kor. Actually, it's 8 saw to a core. Amar Yahu Salbo Rav Chama Barei the Rabba Baravua Asvlach B'Shnei the Rabbi Yochanan. I can understand in the years of Rabbi Yochanan who said only 4 saw to a core. Havi Shmeina Ara. The land was literally fattier, says Rashi. Therefore, since it was able to produce more, even 4 saw was enough. However, Shnei Rabbi Ami Havi Chisha Ara. The land was weaker, so therefore 8 saw was required for a core of land. So it all depended on what the land was able to produce with this amount of seed. So it's not Hasam. So learn Masechtas Peah. Haruach shepizra es ha'omarim. Let's say you have wind that scatters the sheaves, says Rashi, besada throughout a field. V'kiso es a leket shelaniyim ha'mafuzir besada. And the leket was of the poor people were covered up. Then you do a kama leket haya sham l'matim and ha'moirim. And you don't know how much leket is actually underneath there. So says the Gemara, Om dino, so we should evaluate. Kama leket ruyalas v'nois l'niyim. How much does it fit? We don't know because it got all mixed up, if you will, or it's underneath. So we have to make an assessment of how much leket would probably occur for a field. You should give to the niyim, again, this notion of kedei nefila. But kama kedei nefila, so kiyas Rav Dima, Rav Elazar, v'tem Rav Yochanan, arbas kabin l'kor. Again, 4 kav to a core. Fine. Boy Rav Yirmi l'kor zera l'kor tavua. Is this referring to a core of seed or a core of produce? Also, when we're dealing with the amount of seed, is it through your hand or through oxen? Says Rashi. Some people will put the seeds in the ground by hand. Some will put it into a wagon, which is perforated, which has holes in it. And basically the ox will go on its way, and while it's moving, the seeds will go through like the sieve, the sifter, if you will, which is this wagon, and will fall down. And on this, then Rashi says, "V'harbi zera sarchu mafoilas shvarim yosim mepoyos yad." You end up needing more seed for this mechanism of seeding the field than doing it by hand, which you can use less. So which one is it? So Tashma back the bar. The Chiyasi Rabban Amar Rav Avo Amar Belazar V'Yirmel. Some say it was Amar Rav Yochanan. Arbis Kav L'Kor, 4 kav to a core. And here we go. Zera. It's referring specifically to the seed, not the produce. V'Yadayin Boilach. But I still have the question of Mafoyos Yan and Mafoyos Shavarim. That I don't know, and that we leave with Teku. That is an Eboidal Ifshita. That is a question that has not been resolved. Adkan.